Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Agent VI webinar. We're going to start in just a moment. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. We're going to start in 60 seconds. All right, I think with that, we're going to get started today. Just a little bit of housekeeping to help organize our time. In good traditional webinar fashion, we have certain rules that we have to abide by. So we're going to do this webinar in under an hour. We're going to take about 45 to 50 minutes to cover some topics related to analytics, artificial intelligence, and the impact that COVID-19 is having on our industry. It's going to be a little bit more than just AI, as you'll see in some of the discussion. We're going to work in a live demo, and we're going to save some time for questions at the end. Now, the way we'd like to do questions, I've done this a lot of different ways before, but I think the most efficient way is you will find in your Zoom meeting system that there is an ability for you to ask questions. In fact, I've already seen some people asking questions. So at the end, I'm going to open that up, and it's going to be a little bit crazy because I'm not going to be looking at questions during the presentation, but I will look at them at the end. So if you have questions, please try to make them concise and short, since I am, notoriously a slow reader. So the shorter your questions, the more questions we can get through at the end. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about what we're going to cover today. Now, there's a lot of things happening around the world with COVID-19. Obviously, everybody knows about the pandemic that's been impacting countries globally. But I think that there's another thing that is going to happen. We will eventually be past COVID-19. Now, people can debate, is it soon or is it long? But we'll eventually be past this. But I think there's a new reality that will be introduced into the physical security marketplace, which is there will be other pandemics in the future, and the demands on physical security are just going to be different. This is one of these altering moments in both technology and I think the culture of a country where we're just going to think differently in the future about the way things work and the way we do them. So what we're going to try to cover today, and maybe I should just be a little bit humble and start off and admit that even though we, like many technology providers, have been trying to talk with our customers, we've been getting a lot of requests, some of which make a lot of sense, some of which seem a little confusing to us. Everybody's trying to figure out what the new reality is, but I think there are already some common requests that are emerging. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this session into actually two different parts of this topic. The first one is artificial intelligence. What are some of the new uses that are being demanded for AI based on what we're learning from COVID-19? You might be surprised. They're not radically new. Maybe this will just be the time where people start finding better use cases for them. And then in the second half of the presentation, we're going to get into the way this impacts security as a technology, the way it's built and the way it's staffed. So with that, let's go ahead and just power along here. So first, I only have one general overview slide about artificial intelligence and surveillance. And then what I'll do is I'll start dialing into the way this is impacted by COVID-19. So to oversimplify things, the way I like to do, you can really look at the application of artificial intelligence. In fact, let me go ahead and simplify that to start with. What is artificial intelligence? It's not like the movies. You know, it's not like, you know, did the cloud become sentient and now it's going to take over the world? It's really, if I want to oversimplify it, we're going to develop intelligent algorithms that use software to attempt to do the work that in the past has been done by a human operator that might have been watching that video. So in a way, we're going to do in software what the brain does intuitively, we're going to try to do that in software. And so for this presentation, that's how we're going to approach this. What are the things that we can use, you know, the latest generation of sophisticated software to do that the human operator would have traditionally done, you know, previously or even currently. And I find that breaks down into four main categories. And I'm going to share these to help organize our thinking. First, we have proactive security. This is where we're going to use software to watch cameras or watch the video that's coming in from cameras. It's going to detect something, and there's a lot of different ways that even that word detect can be applied. But generally, the cameras are not being watched. Software is watching and monitoring the cameras. And then based on something it sees, behavior, a practice, any number of things, it's then going to generate some kind of an alarm. And that alarm can go to a lot of different places. And for today's session, we're not going to get a lot into how you distribute alarms, but we're going to talk more about the alarm generation itself. So the first thing is you use software to detect things, to watch video and see something that's happening. Now you have another kind of obvious application of that same software. If I can use the software to watch video in real time, I can also use that software to look backwards in time at stored video to find similar things of interest, and that's a forensic tool. That's basically an investigation, a search. You can call it what you want, but it's basically using the same concepts. But now, instead of thinking ahead of time what you might be looking for and setting up, let's say, a scenario that you want to be alarmed on, now you're going to think, hey, I really want to go backwards and look, you know, through some stored video and see. Maybe it's in case of, you know, employees. I want to see certain behaviors now that I understand I've got an issue at a factory plant. I want to do some forensic investigation to see how long that issue's been happening. You use that as an investigation tool. Enhanced situational awareness is a little bit of a combination of the first two, but now what we do is we start using the algorithm to not just do detections and classification, but we're going to use the system to start doing some more calculations to give a better awareness of the situation. Now, this could be a lot of things. Enhanced situational awareness could be combining alarms from different sources, but it could also be, for example, providing geospatial awareness on alarms so that an operator can more quickly triage to see, do I have a common incident? How can I find what's happening? But it's basically an idea that you're going to improve the overall awareness of the environment. This is going to be most critical in public areas where you're not always sure what's happening and when something's happening, but you need just an overall improved awareness of what's happening. So we'll call that situational awareness. And then the final area is actually, you know, in some ways the least sexy, but one of the most common uses, probably one of the, when we talk about artificial intelligence specifically, is we talk about things like deep learning and the ability to do inference from large data sets. That's actually been done as a data insight since at least the mid-90s, not in video, but in other industries besides ours. So improved insights is where if we can classify an object, we can count them, we keep data on them, then why not give the ability to generate reports that executives can use to understand their environment better? Like I said, the simplest example would be if you have a camera at the front of a store, maybe for shoplifting, you might use that for detection, you might use it for investigation, but you might also want to know how many people are going in and out of your store. You know, that's a perfect example of, you know, item 1, 2, and 4 on this slide. So this is the high level quick and skinny on what it is we do with AI and how it applies to video surveillance. So for the purposes for this call, what I'm going to do now is we're going to increasingly get specific into how the use cases are changing and what people are at least asking us, Agent VI, to do with AI. I will say, as one heads up, one of the good notes, we're a little pleased about this, that a lot of the things that we're being requested to do are really more just imagining different ways to use technology that we already have. So fortunate for us, we really haven't had to go and invent anything wildly new yet. We'll see. Maybe not all the crazy ideas have come in yet. But if we look at AI and the uses that are being created for it by the new, we say COVID-19, but really for this discussion, we should think of that as a new awareness that pandemics can change the operating state of an entire country or a state or a business for weeks, months, or more. And so let's talk a little bit. Actually, let me say one more thing about that. By the way, this is our first of several webinars, so some of this is stuff that I'm figuring out even as we're going here. We should recognize that even once COVID-19 is gone, there is a practical reality. I hate to be a silver lining in the cloud kind of guy, but there is a practical reality that you may have a heightened awareness of companies during flu seasons, for example, to say we want to start changing some of our workplace practices to reduce absenteeism at work by following better health practices, for example, for just during a severe flu season. So it's not a pandemic, it's not something that's life-threatening, but businesses are businesses. And I think some of the things they're learning from COVID-19 are going to stick actually as best practices, and best practices that they might turn on and off even on a week-by-week basis. Again, using the example of like a severe flu season, where they might say in February, in the Northeast, where they're going to have a severe outbreak of flu, we're going to put in practice some of our, our guidance for our employees. So generally looking at AI and how this might impact a pandemic situation, we can separate it into two different, very broad categories. Now, I will say in the planning for this session, we obviously reviewed a lot of this material throughout Agent VI. There's a lot of debate on, what goes in which category. And I'll just say right now, the truth is, it's not as simple as just one category, detection, and another one, forensic. But for the purposes of today, it's an easy way to look at the problem so you can see ways to deploy the technology, for your operating environments or your customer spaces. So on the detection side, let's think of it as you want to mitigate impact during a pandemic, or like I said, maybe it's just a flu outbreak. And there are some pretty obvious ones. In fact, there's three, I'm going to call it 3+1. The three practices that everybody, in fact, if you don't know these three practices by now, then you're obviously not paying attention to any news, anywhere in the world. Social distancing, okay, just, germs, they got to get from point A to point B. And so social distancing, in fact, I'm almost getting to the point where, it's, there's signs everywhere. I can't open a web page without somebody telling me to stay away from people. So enforcing social distancing, this one is a case where you might want to be able to have a camera. And I like to put this in real world terms. Let's say a camera in a workplace, maybe it's a warehouse, and you have an area of that warehouse where employees like to congregate. Maybe it's it's an outdoor area where employees go out to smoke. Maybe it's a coffee, area where they go on breaks to get coffee. And during periods of flu or a pandemic, your warehouse is still operating, but you've now put in place your social distancing guidelines. So you may want to say to your employees, don't congregate, and you might want to have your operations center get alarmed if it's becoming a practice where you have people grouping. And I'll actually show a demonstration of this in just a minute. Enforcing movement and traffic restrictions in similar ways. You may have a customer who decides for, well, actually, this is a very real example. I have a very large utility that we work with, And one of the first things that they did, because they had to stay open, they said non-essential personnel can work from home, but they're a utility. I mean, they're running. I mean, they're generating power. In fact, if anything, their bills are going to be, their demand is higher than ever because everybody's working from home. So one of the things that the first things they did is they changed the employee entrance, because they realized that they had certain entrances that employees were using that were also entrances that customers would come in to pay bills. So they just told all the employees, no, you have to use the side entrance, and they had to kind of reconfigure things pretty quickly to figure out how to let employees badge in through some of these entrances to separate them from general public coming into the same building. That would be an example of enforcing movement and traffic restrictions. So you might set up different alerts to be looking at people entering and exiting certain parts of a building. Crowd and occupancy is really sort of a variation of the enforced social distancing, but now instead of looking at actual distance between people, you're going to look at densities. Crowding being just the density of people in a given area, which can in our case can be determined oftentimes by percentage of area, or occupancy would be the number of people in a given zone. So it's sort of a special variation of the first bullet. Now I said it's 3+1 because there's something else that happens during a pandemic. And I hopefully we're all here from the industry, and I don't create any offense in this next comment, but there's a really cruel reality from a physical security standpoint. The first reaction that we began seeing at Agency I beginning in early March, once businesses started closing down either voluntarily or by governor's orders, since we do a lot in the central monitoring industry, the first reaction was crime started to skyrocket. And we started getting calls from our central monitoring customers saying, our customers, they're strained because their buildings are closed, but now they've gone from 12 hours a day closed to 24 hours a day. So they're asking us to double our monitoring. And at the same time, crime is going through the roof because I guess, criminals figure they're invincible to COVID-19. So when they see businesses closed, to them, they're like, hey, this is a great time to, go into that, that hardware store and go in the back lot and steal a bunch of stuff, or break a window and steal some tools, or car lots, go in and, steal some cars or break into a parts container, whatever it is. So there is sort of it's not the sexiest part of this presentation, but it might be one of the most practical parts, that crime goes up when businesses are closed. And in this case, protecting assets is one of the things that we do as an industry. That's one of the first things we do, and one of the most obvious things where customers will spend money quickly, because obviously if you're losing goods off of your lot because somebody's breaking in and stealing, you'll then pay money to increase your technology to protect those assets. All right, so you have a group of different, I'm going to share a little bit more illustrations of this in just a minute. So then you have the forensic side, which is a little different. Now this is where, even me as somebody that's supposed to be the evangelist for analytics will admit, in real life, a lot of times if you set an alarm, let's take this social distancing, let's say you set an alarm in that factory. Are you really going to have your security operations center get on an intercom and call down to a coffee room and say, hey, you people there, remember, you're only supposed to have 4 people in the coffee room at a time, there's 7. Okay, you could, but what I think really happens, particularly in most corporate settings, is they're going to enact a policy that they're then going to enforce more through investigation. So there's a couple things for that. I'll start with the second bullet. You might monitor social distancing. So you might look at, at the end of the day, you might just say, let's look at, and I'll give a demo of something similar to this. Let's look at all situations where we had more than 5 people in our coffee room, in our break room. And then you go and you look at it and you realize, hey, at the 11 a.m. shift, everybody's rushing to the coffee room. So you might send then a note to the manager, or you might make an announcement to the employees. Or if you have a real problem with corporate policy, at that point you might actually send a letter to a particular employee and say, we noticed you in the coffee room at this time, having a card game. I mean, I'm making that up, but whatever, employees do what they want. And so you use that as an enforcement technique. By that same token, that last bullet, collect and report on statistics for facilities, there's another reality that I think is so often forgotten in our industry, in the physical security industry, that the people typically that actually that create the budgets and write the checks are almost never the people that actually sit in front of the systems that we create. They're executives, they're managers, they're CIOs, they're security officers, they're presidents, they're division directors. And what they want to see is they want to see statistics. And so this is another great example where if you're trying to enforce certain policies in your facility, you might want to say, I want to have a count of active employees in the facility on weekends. Or in the case of like a retailer, you might want to have a count of people on average in your store at a certain time to see if you're meeting certain standards for occupancy in your store, example, during a pandemic. Now, I kept skipping over that first bullet under forensic, which is conduct contact tracing. Now, this is something that I haven't heard a lot about this yet in the United States, but it is coming up frequently in other markets, and I think we're going to see this. And it's more the situation, what do you do during that time when you're not shut down? You want to be open, you want to be doing business, and then all of a sudden you find out that one of your people has a certain virus. And they report in and say, hey, I just went to my doctor last week, I wasn't feeling well at the end of the week, and I came back and I have this new severe flu strain that's broken out. So what you do with contact tracing is you actually, and this is what we tried doing early on, but it got overwhelmed pretty quickly. You want to be able to go back through your video forensically and maybe see different areas where that person may have been to notify other people in other areas of the company or other departments that they might have been exposed to the environment. So it's contact tracing. All right, a lot of new uses, and the truth is you can mix and match because every business, every city, everybody's going to decide differently how they want to attack the problem. So let me talk a little bit about real-time analytics, again, in general, and then here in just a minute, I'm going to bring up a live system. So the first thing is, what is AI? Now, if you really want to deep dive, call somebody at Agent VI. We'll set up a webinar and we'll take an hour and just talk about AI. This is really an emerging technology. We've been around as a company. We're now a 17-year-old company. We were actually one of the first analytics companies in the market. And I can tell you from experience, both at Agent VI and at prior companies, there really has been a sea change in the world of software-driven intelligence and video. In our case, it was about 4 years ago when we switched to deep learning algorithms. And I'm going to give you a couple quick examples. First, these newer algorithms really just don't have the same level of problems with bad video. In this case, I show an example of inclement weather on the far left pane of this slide. And I'll just tell you that that's the kind of image that in prior versions with Anomaly, if you called our support, you would have probably gotten a nice support person who would have said, could you clean the lens? That would have been the trouble ticket resolution. With our newer system, it's a new system we call Anomaly. You'll see it in a minute. Since it's an AI-driven or it's a deep learning-driven algorithm, these algorithms are just not as sensitive to noise, grainy video, trees blowing, trash, spots on. They're not completely impervious to them, but they're literally orders of magnitude better than the old way we used to do it. Which leads us to the middle pane, which is it gave us a new way to create object classes and much more detailed and refined object classes. And again, I'll show you some of that when I get to the system because it's an easier thing to show than to talk about. But now not only do we have a much broader set of classifications that we can identify objects as, but we can even create custom object classes. In this example, you can see a video for a city of an object class that is trash. Okay, so we taught the system what a trash pile looks like. All right, because to that city, that was a big deal. And then you get to the third, which I'll cover this in a minute, which is the ability to start looking at anomalies. Now, in fact, let me just go ahead and race forward because this will start to illustrate a little bit of the lesson that I'm hoping that we can share in this presentation. So you can think about detection. That's this first scenario of analytics, real-time detection, in two different kinds of camps. Now, it's all using the same algorithms, but they're used fundamentally different. The first one is if you know what you're looking for. Now, here's an example, and these are the kind of things that you might use in actually deploying best practices and procedures in response to a pandemic. Obviously, occupancy. So if you know, for example, you have a certain occupancy, this maybe would be a waiting area, at a hospital, or a waiting area, using the example of the utility I was mentioning, a waiting area at their payment center, where they might say, you know what, we never want to have more than 10 people in that waiting area at one time. You could just set up a rule, define an occupancy, and just say if it's beyond a certain level, set off an alarm, and then we either react to it, or in some cases you can even automate a response to that. Like the classic would be airports, where it's go left, go right, based on the number of people in different lines and zones. Grouping is a similar concept, except now it's based more on proximity than just simply count. And then distancing is kind of, in a way, sort of the reverse of a grouping. It's actually part of our grouping rule. It's just a different setting. And this is where you now want to say, well, it's not how many people are in the zone by density. It's now I want to make sure that the people are separated by certain distances. So we still consider it sort of a grouping rule, but it's a special case grouping rule. But again, if you know the policy you're trying to enforce, let's say that break room again at a warehouse, you will just set up that rule and generate an alarm if you have a problem. And then we have all of the traditional rules that have been used for decades in analytics. So you can set up different standards for line crossing, moving in an area, loitering. These are very much the intrusion, the asset protection rules, and they're used pretty extensively because obviously the assets that get stolen first are the outdoor ones. They're the easiest to get to. So you would use all of these rules. Again, if you know what you're looking for, you just set up a rule. But there's this irony that as you get to more and more cameras, particularly when you get to environments like cities, as you'll see in a minute, where you have outdoor cameras in public spaces, there's no way you could set up a rule. You don't know what you're looking for. In fact, if you have hundreds of cameras and you're a city, it's a waste of time to try to set up a bunch of rules. So in that case, you don't know what you're looking for, but there's something beautiful about the mind. You'll know it when you see it. See, the intuition of the mind is one of the I guess what I was saying is, well, for all of our AI, the mind is still the best intelligence. And so in the case of Anomaly, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a scene. We're going to learn that scene over the course of weeks. And then based on normal behavior, we will then set off a notification for something that seems different. Now, this is an important distinction. There have been others in our industry, they're out of business now, but there were others in our industry that tried pushing this concept of just turn it on and it works. But they didn't, in fact, ironically, I think one of the reasons they failed is they didn't explain it right. This is not magic. Anomaly detection doesn't actually know that something is an abnormality. It doesn't actually know that something's a crime. It doesn't even know it's an incident. All it knows is that something unusual or different, actually it doesn't even know it's unusual. It just knows something different is happening. So in this case, we will set off a notification, an image would pop up, and then the operator would verify, is that actually something I need to pay attention to or not? So it's really part of situational awareness more than detection. So that's a little primer on Anomaly. And then I'll just very briefly talk about the second thing, the forensic side. And this is where you know what you're looking for, but you need to find it. And I'm just going to say right now, we've had a search tool now for over a decade, both in our some of our earlier product versions as well as our newer product. And we've learned a lot about search. And I'll just tell you straight up, the entire key to search is really about speed. Because if you think about it, if it's just one camera you need to search, all right, you can go fast forward back. And, maybe if you have to go back 7 hours, that's a lot of fast forward. But if I take that camera and I say, well, I can go fast forward like 10 to 1, but now I give you, let's say, 100 cameras to search on, no matter how fast you can review or scroll or go through a synopsis on that video, it's going to take you hours of visually verifying what you're looking for. So in your search, the whole concept is you want to be able to search large volumes of video across all of your cameras quickly. And that's the other thing. If you want to use search as a tool for speed, particularly if you're going to use it in any kind of what I'll call a fast forensic investigation, this might be, hey, somebody came to work today and they went home sick. We need to very quickly see where they were in the office. You don't have hours to do that. So you need to have that data available immediately on your cameras for rapid response. And then the final thing is you want to be able to filter quickly, because the problem is you might know what you're looking for and you want to find it fast, but the reality is humans do really well when you give them quick filter settings. And this is one of the cool things about some of the newer GUIs that have come out over the last couple of years. All right, now I've been talking a lot, done a lot of PowerPoint. People have been very patient, letting me go quickly. So let's get to fun stuff. All right, so we're going to change scenes here. All right, I need to take a breath, because here's the place. I'll share this for those of you who don't know me. You have not heard this before, but up until probably 2 or 3 years ago, through my entire career of 30 years, I always hated demos, live demos, because invariably I'd get onto a live demo, and if it was out in the real world, no matter how much we practice, things would happen, because live is unscripted. It's not like the movies where you go do a reshoot 10 times until you get it right. On stage, if the lights go out, you adapt. So here we go. What I've just opened up is actually 100% bona fide live Agency I Anomaly system. Now I'm going to start covering a bunch of things here as I start dialing into the use cases for, let's call it pandemic planning and response. But I want to start by illustrating one of the things that I'm actually going to get to in the last part of this webinar, which is, you need a way, unless you're an airport, and now airports are complicated for their own ways, but one thing an airport has going for it is they might have 2,000 cameras, but those cameras typically all run through a cable back to a data closet in one room. But in real world, if you're a corporation, if you're a city, if you've got multiple sites, if you're a central monitoring company, then you are, by definition, you got cameras every place. So the first thing I want you to see about this live system, I came up in my account, so I'm logged in, as you can see up here on the right, as AJ Fraser. I have, for this login that I have here, I have limited powers, so I can look at stuff, but I'm limited to some of the changes I can make, which is fine, because other people use this at Agency I. But you'll see right here, all of the cameras that I have available to me globally are already here in a map view. So let me show you some of the high-level things that, just to give you a concept of what we could do from one interface. By the way, I'm sitting in Northern Virginia, right here, right outside of Washington, D.C. So wherever you're dialed in from, my desk is in Virginia. And I have access to all these cameras. I could administer those cameras, and I'll show you a little bit about what that means in a second. Now, I could monitor those cameras. I'll give a caveat to that, because I am going to show some monitoring, but as much as I can monitor those cameras here from Virginia, I also have a tool for integrations. I don't have anything hooked up right now, but I can define integrations that I can send alarms to and metadata. It could be VMS. So we work with a lot of, all of the major VMSs. It could be an alarm monitoring system. It could be a customer's own in-house data system. So I have ways that I can integrate and send it out, but I also have my own monitoring tool, which is typically used for data reporting. And then there are actually a few customers that use this, even though it's not the way we primarily promote the system. And then, as I mentioned, I have an investigation tool, and then I have some reports. Don't have a lot of great report data to show today. So with this system, let's jump into some stuff that looks like real video. So first off, now to give a little bit more background on this, I have a mix in this demonstration I'm going to show you of some cameras where the cameras are simulated. So the software doesn't know it, but it's actually a fake camera playing video off of a hard drive, but I also have some live cameras, like real live. Like if you see a bank robbery in progress, just know that you don't know, it's not in your neighborhood. Be thankful, but it's real live. So we'll see how that works. That's a little scary sometimes. So here I go. Let's take a look at this view. All right, a good, nice, active view of Bryant Park. Here we can see when I come up initially, I open up in the dashboard here for this camera, so I can see a live view. I can see a quick thumbnail of the different rules. In this case, one of my engineers set up a social distancing rule for this demo on this park. I can see sort of events that if I were exporting these events could be exported or they could be reported. But so let's take a look at the rule they set up. So what they did, I just clicked over on the rule tab. See, I'm still on Bryant Park's camera. They set up a rule. They called it social distancing. But if I open that rule up, what you're going to see is they actually defined a grouping rule. They defined an object type. They gave a dwell time, a number of people, and then they gave a minimum distance. And since we're an Israeli company, we speak metric. Okay, so there you go, so 2 meters for us. And then there's some other things. I can set up severity for different alarming purposes. I can actually attach schedules. I'm not going to do that today. It gets a little bit boring. And then some other things that I can do with that image. So here I've got a rule set up. And now at this point, I can jump over. Now I have a bunch of things here. First, and I'm going to show a different camera with a better illustration of the mapping view. But the first thing you'll notice when it defaulted, at least in my monitoring, I see the alarms down the left side, but I can also see the alarms on a map. In this case, it's a Google map. But normally for a monitoring situation, but especially for one camera, what you would do is you would look at the grid view. Now with the grid view, this gives me a different way to see what's happening. So for example, I can look here and I can see these different incidents that have happened. Now, when we see an incident, we're going to actually capture a verification clip. So here you go. Let's see. All right. So there, I've got an incident of 2 people, evil people. Look at them. What are the things going loitering there in front of the in front of the gift shop? I'm playing that on an 8-second clip because that would be the verification clip. But I could also, at this point, if I was using this as a monitoring situation, again, most people would actually push this alarm out to their VMS if they have a centralized VMS. If they're a monitoring company, they would probably push this alarm out to their monitoring software. But they do, but for verification purposes, we have the ability to jump to the live and actually now go to a real-time view of that same scene as it is in real time. So I have a way that I can interact with that. Sticking with this same alarming, I could go and do a list view. Now this is not going to demo well because it's so small probably on your screen, but you can see in a list view, alarms are actually going to come in and stack up, and then I can actually hover and I can see, the different alarms that go down the right side. I could actually play them back. I can organize them by severity. There's a lot of different ways I can look at this, in a list view. But let's talk for a second about a more real scenario on that park. So let's say here I want to look at that camera, but I didn't have an alarm set up. Now here I'm back to that camera view, but now I'm going to go do an investigation. Now I've opened up my investigation scene, and again, I'll show a better example of this in a second because there's only one camera, so it kind of looks stupid on the map. But I could select the camera on the map, but in this case, I only have one camera. So I'll just go ahead and I'll select the camera by sensor. But now I'm going to do something a little bit different because I looked at that scene, and I realized, I don't care about the people loitering in front of the store. Actually, I'm concerned about the people on the left because I've had a problem with workmen just hanging out over there. So I can now define moving in an area. Here, in fact, we'll just go ahead and do this and do a grouping, again, sticking with that theme. Go ahead and set a dwell time, a few seconds. Let's go ahead and look for people that are basically hanging out there. I can set a time range. So here, I'm going to do the last 12 hours. Now, as I just said a minute ago, if I click on that image, you'll see it defaults to the whole field of view. But usually when you're doing an investigation, that's not really what you're so concerned with. So let's go ahead and let's kind of aim for the target here. Let's because again, I don't have a great lunchroom clip. I wish I did. If I did, I would actually draw this around the coffee machine. All right, let's see what we find here. Now you'll notice as that system, it's showing you a status bar. So it's going to populate the images as it finds them. Now, one of the secrets to what we do and why our search is so fast is one of the things that Agent VI is known for. In fact, it goes back to our name. Agent VI was in 2003 taking out a patent with the idea that we could break down an image into its feature artifacts and create metadata for that. So when I do a search, I'm actually able to just search the metadata, and then I just go and I pull up the video of interest. And sure enough, here I go. Here, now I'm in my search, so I went looking backwards. And in this case, I set my dwell time pretty low, so obviously I got a group of people that take more than 3 seconds to walk through that zone. But here I've now narrowed my search. Okay, so being sensitive to time, let's do something more fun. All right, I say more fun after I gave you my talk about how I'm terrified of live demos. I actually have some real bona fide live cameras. So any skiers in the crowd, I've just zoomed in on Jackson Hole. And now as you see, I went back to my, my overview, and in my Jackson Hole, I can see device status. I don't really have, let's see, I have some live cameras here. So now I can actually see I've got these cameras here, and they're shown on the map. And so I've actually got an intersection with 2 cameras, one on one side, one on the other. In fact, if I go to the camera view, you'll see here, if I click the camera view at this level, it will show me the cameras I have available. This one's offline, the far left, but you can see I've got one camera looking across the street, or across the corner, another camera looking here. All right, so here we go. Let's see how well people in Jackson Hole are behaving. So, and by the way, this is totally live. I mean, this is the real deal, people. All right, so I'm going to go and do an investigation. So I'm going to jump over here. Okay, now at this point, if I wanted to do it on the map, I could actually just draw a boundary around the cameras that I'm interested in. But for time, I'm going to jump right to a camera where I know I've got, oops, let's see if that camera's still working. Okay. So now I'm going to look for grouping, people, dwell, 3 seconds. Let's go for groups of 3. Here, I'm going to go back 24 hours because it's actually still kind of early. Okay, but now I'm going to draw a zone. And really, honestly, I'm not totally sure what I'm about to find. So, again, if I pick up a mugging in Jackson Hole, then somebody please dial 911 and report it. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay, here's a moment of truth. Oh, I love it when technology works. Okay, here we go. So here I see 4 instances, and I can look at dates on these. So these were all yesterday, which kind of makes sense. It's still a little bit early in the morning there. But as of yesterday, so now I'm actually pulling up a clip to see. And sure enough, if that is not a, look at that family, somebody with a baby in a stroller just crowding like they're just out to destroy humanity there, walking into the park. But there's an example, of doing a group detection. But let's do something maybe even a little bit more interesting. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the live now. I'm going to change my search. I'm going to change my search parameters. We're going to go ahead and do the investigation again. This time, though, I am going to pick cameras on a map. So I'm going to do this. All right, so I picked those 2 cameras. But now I'm going to look for people. I gave it a dwell time. But I'm going to look more specifically for people that are wearing red. Now, I really want to say, I know that, folks go to trade shows and they see demos like this all the time. This is not canned video. So, we're going to see, what we get here. I guess I got to pick my, Here we go, do it this way. So it should have all of my, okay, so I have the entire field of view because I'm just looking for somebody in red moving in an area. See, I gave it last 24 hours, looks good. All right, let's see. I don't know, maybe people in Jackson Hole don't wear red. I don't know. Oh, okay. How about that? So here we go. Oh, this is a great one here. This is an excellent illustration, the one that I just opened up. If you look at some of these images, now what we're going to do, see, this is a perfect illustration. When I go to playback, see, I had it set for zoom in, so the actual thumbnails you're seeing are zoomed in on the image. But if you actually look at the full field of view, you'll see it was able to pick out somebody wearing red. That's probably a good 40 meters away. Like to an operator, they would never be able to see that in the full field of view. But software can do things that the human mind can't do. Software is actually able to look at every pixel and every part of the scene, all the way down to the resolution of the camera. So this is a great example. Oh yeah, I joke people in Jackson Hole don't wear red, but apparently they like red. Red's a very popular color in Jackson Hole because, I tried this an hour ago and I think I only found one person. I guess everybody's waking up and going out shopping now. All right. Now I know I'm blasting through very quickly, and I will say honestly, there's so much more that I could demo here today, but I think there's an important topic that I need to get to. In terms of what's really happening with the whole COVID-19. Now, I'm going to say this again for those of you who know me. I'm a little bit cynical sometimes, and this is going to be a very cynical comment. Up until this point, I've showed you all the really sexy stuff. If you're an end user on this call and you want to talk with your boss about the kind of things you can do with AI and dealing with pandemic planning, response, mitigation, then you're going to show them the demo I just showed you, and they're going to go, "Wow, that's really cool." But what I really believe is happening is there's a huge wake-up call that has just slammed into our industry, and I started calling some of the end users that I know and asking them, "What changes do you really see happening fast?" And they're all talking about, well, I want to be able to detect people's temperature. I want to be able to detect, social distancing. But I made a list of the 3 things that I think will impact us real monetarily, meaning we need to change the way we do stuff. And it breaks into these 3 categories. First, technology needs to be deployed where it's needed. Now, it's great if you're a huge city and you've got multi-million-dollar security budgets where you can upgrade and forklift all of your technology. The reality is there's a lot of customers out there now calling Agent VI who need to add advanced intelligence to their systems, and it's going to take them a year or 2 before they can swap out or forklift or change out cameras or change out VMSs or upgrade or whatever it is. And so we need to make technology available, where it's required, and it needs to be able to be offered in a way that's costly and timely, because the problem with pandemics is today it's COVID-19. Maybe 2 years from now, it's some other completely new pandemic, and maybe it hits in a different area of the country. A city that would have never thought that they would need. You can't put enough money into enough infrastructure to prepare for everything. You have to be able to react, and that means you have to be able to deploy technology more quickly and cost effective. I would say to any end users on the call, that means you do need to keep the technology you've got up to date at least. Because when we show up with customers and they've got this real example, happened just last month, 10-year-old VMS, I'm like, dude, I can't even get that API for that VMS. There's nothing we can do. Second thing is systems need to be available remotely. Let's talk about a crass reality. The most obvious single point of failure during a pandemic is the SOC. People are the ones who carry the viruses. So if you have a single SOC that's responsible for monitoring all of your sites, around a state or around the country or through your buildings, you have a problem because maybe you can't bring those people in. Maybe 2 of those people got infected and you have to quarantine all the rest, but now your SOC is empty. So systems have to be available remotely. And I'm really not preaching this for those of you who know me because, you know, I'm trying to push Agent VI. This is the most obvious reality. And I won't say who, but one of the large users, end users I talk with, very large. They have been sort of cloud friendly. I talked to them last week and they told me they got a mandate within 48 hours that every one of their operational systems had to be online and available to their operations staff within 30 days. This, by the way, is a many, many billion-dollar operating company. And the reason was obvious. They said, we have to close our facilities. We're mandated, we have to close and we have to get people out of our facilities. Systems need to be available remotely. And then finally, the systems have to be able to expand and contract. Now, this is not something we like hearing as vendors, but the reality is you have to be able to deploy technology and you have to be able to undeploy it in some situations because your staff needs. You might have an increased staff, you know, a requirement during a pandemic because now your buildings are closed. In fact, my central monitoring partners, this is exactly what they're running into. They're like, I have to double the hours I monitor, which means I have to double my monitoring staff. But, you know, in a couple months, I probably won't need all that staff. So they need to staff up more workstations that they will then be staffing down. They might need to deploy our analytics on more cameras that eventually they'll take off. So more flexibility, resources need to be more expandable. All right, now the cynics and the counter cynics in the audience are going to go, oh, AJ, you've been thinking about cloud all along. I saw this coming. You were just building us up to say cloud. This is, by the way, an exact illustration of what I just demonstrated. An Anomaly core, which is a central account that I was logged into, running with edge devices that we have running at sites all over the world. So what you were seeing as a live camera was based on this architecture. But just so people don't think that this was all a secret to push cloud, we also have customers doing exactly this, where they have built their own private clouds in their data centers. So their entire network is completely, in one case, air-gapped. Literally, it is unreachable through any public loop from any telco anywhere. And they built an entire cloud infrastructure. So they get all the benefits of cloud, which, by the way, also includes the ability to make workstations available to users with a simple IP secure it, so they don't have to VPN and do remote desktops out to all their users. They can just give their users browser-based, you know, login access to an Apache server somewhere in their private cloud, and now their users can do all of the things that I just demonstrated, for example. And let me just hit you with one more slide, and then I think I will have 5 minutes. I know I'm going really fast here. Here's digging down just a little bit deeper to the way we architected our system. Now, for those of you who think that I set this whole presentation up to somehow take advantage of COVID-19, I'd just like to say we launched this commercially 4 years ago, what you're seeing here. We're now just rolling out our second generation of this product that you're seeing here, Anomaly. This is actually, a new product for us that we launched 4 years ago. But one of the things that we realized, maybe we were just lucky, was that one of the big problems was remote site management. And so we re-architected our system so that now you can place what we call an Anomaly Edge. That could be our appliance, it could be our software running on your hardware, but it's now out at a local site. That appliance is going to create all of the metadata. So I do not need to stream video up to the cloud unless you're doing a live view, then obviously you do that. All of the video is processed by the device out at the local site. The cloud, then what we call the Anomaly core running in the cloud, does all of the more sophisticated parts. This would be auto learning, auto calibration, anomaly detection. Search is obviously cloud driven because that's really a database feature. And then the results are connected into the user's application, which could again be their VMS, it could be a monitoring system, or in the case of what I just showed you, it's actually a web interface running connected to our cloud. All right, wow, that's a lot to cover. So what I'm going to do now Oh, by the way, the obligatory, we're Agency I, we've been around a long time, we're great, have lots of customers. Okay, there you go. So what I'm going to do now is we did get some Q&A. I'm going to go through as many questions as I've got time to get through in the last 5 minutes of this webinar. But I will say, is particularly if there's any real, hardcore, tech questions, you should just go ahead and give us a call. We can set up a call with a sales engineer. We can review your design. There's a lot of things that we can do to basically, help inform you. But in general, we're not going to, on this call, get into too much detail. Okay, so let's see. Here's the questions. Oh my goodness. I was going to pronounce names giving credit, but I see the first two names. I have no way I'll ever pronounce that right. So as a respect, out of respect for the names that I will butcher, I'm not going to give credit to whose questions. Okay. The distance between people in 3D views, bird's eye view. Yeah, so what we're actually doing, and this is one of the things that we've been able to do this for a long time, but with our newer platform, we're now incorporating this into the user aspects of the system. When we look at a camera, one of the first things we need to do with an analytics company is we need to translate that camera view from 3D to 2D. Because a person who is like 100 meters away looks like 50 pixels or 20 pixels. When they're 10 meters away, they might look like they're 200 pixels, but they're still a 6 foot tall person. So we've always had this ability to auto-learn, auto-calibrate the scene, and then translate it into 2D space. So that distance is a 2D calculation because under the hood, we know people, we know where they're at, and that's how we're also able to show them on a map. Okay, I figured this question will come up about thermographic sensing. I'm just going to say right now, that's all the people trying to do temperature detection. I get it. By the way, we don't, we can work with IR cameras. We can also work with thermal cameras. But in terms of the data for being able to do temperature sensor monitoring, I just tell you right now, there's going to be a technology bloodbath there. Because half the solutions that people are running around with don't work for people. They don't work because the systems aren't accurate enough. They don't work because they don't have the right black body sources to be able to calibrate. So we're going to let the dust settle before we decide, whether we want to bring that data into, for example, our monitoring service. Let's see, questionnaire search feature. Oh, I will say this, hello, Judah. I see Judah is with VI Sentry, one of our large monitoring partners that can actually do all of the work I just showed, but actually have people do it, for a living, full time. The search feature for people, red shirt. So he's asking about the search for red, for example. Is that from the cloud or the VMS? The answer technically is it's sort of both. So what we do is we're going to look at the video stream in real time as it's being, let's say, streamed to a Genetec or a Milestone system or a Cognify or a Verint system. We're going to look at that video in real time. We're going to collect the metadata, which includes the color coding of what we see on that object as we classify it. The playback, however, that can come from one of two sources. If there's no VMS, we have just think of it as a dumb recorder that's like a 1 frame per second recorder that's really used for thumbnails. So you can get thumbnail views, but you're not really going to be able to get an accurate view from that simple built-in thumbnail recorder. If you're connected to a VMS, then we'll take the metadata search and we'll pull up the correct camera and the timestamp, and we'll actually play the video back from the VMS, which really is your primary source for storage. Let's see. Let's see, another question. The anomaly rule on PTZs. Yeah. Anomaly does not like PTZs. The anomaly, the way it works is it's going to look at the scene over time. It's going to look for classified objects. It's then going to look for patterns of motion. It's then going to correlate. It's actually a whole new science. It's really, in a weird way, not even an analytic. So the anomaly really needs to have a fixed camera to work well, and it needs weeks. And by the way, if you want to teach it to detect people jumping over fences, don't let it learn while you've got crews working jumping over fences. It will actually learn that as a normal behavior. There's a question about red shirt body temperature. We don't know body temperature. We'd have no way of knowing that right now. Let me see if I can scan down through this, see if there's any. Yeah, there is a question. There's a question about integration with a Vigilon. I should send you to a Vigilon. Does anybody integrate with a Vigilon? We try to stay friendly in the marketplace. They have their own analytics. They say they're open. I think they used to say that, and then people found they weren't very open. So no, we don't maintain an integration with a Vigilon right now. We do with most other VMSs, or at least we have cooperative arrangements. Like I see somebody here asking about Salient, and actually, we've been in dialogue with Salient over the last couple of weeks just about updating integrations with some of their systems. So with that, I think out of respect for time, I apologize. We have run out of time on this call. There's a lot of good questions here. So please feel free to contact Agent VI. You can contact us, at sales@agentvi.com, and we can have a sales engineer follow up with you, particularly for the more techie questions. So again, I appreciate all of your time today, and thanks for staying with me, and hope you found this productive, and stay safe.